Abby and Paul move to a new house, located away from other buildings. They really like the smart home system, including the video cameras installed inside and the reinforced glass. The realtor shows them the master bedroom and bathroom with a huge window. However, one room remains unfurnished because it could become an ideal children's room in the future. Paul unpacks boxes and places an old phone in the living room, joking that it's in case the smart home breaks down unexpectedly. Abby arranges the frames with their wedding photos. Finally, they come out onto the roof terrace, which offers a magnificent view. Late in the evening, the couple sits on the terrace, admiring the stars. Abby shows her husband the constellations, and he jokes about their names. The couple realizes that they can be happy here. In the morning, Abby goes to work at Integrate Robotics, where she helps develop the household assistance system. Once inside, she notices a video of her boss's face, who immediately approaches her and explains that this is their new development. A fake image of a person that is created in real time or deepfake. The boss accompanies her to the department that she will now head. Later, he invites their family to a party and mentions a gift from the company that is waiting for them at home. In the evening, Abby returns home, where she is met by her husband, who again could not find a suitable job. They go to the garage where the package for her contains a robot assistant that her department is working on. Paul doesn't like the idea, but Abby convinces him to try the robot for at least a week. The robot opens its eyes and introduces itself as Tim. Tim standing for Technologically Integrated Major Domo. The robot immediately asks to be given passwords to home devices and personal email accounts to save people time, but Abby asks that the matter be put off until tomorrow. The robot immediately shows its concern by remotely turning on the water in the bathroom. Later, he talks about a car arriving as Abby comes downstairs, impressing her husband with her gorgeous appearance. The couple gets into the autonomous car, although they can always put it in manual mode. The two drive to a party. There they are met by the exact same robot butler, and drinks are served by robot waiters with identical faces. The boss introduces Abby to his guests, who admits that her husband is not happy with Tim, but the boss is very pleased with the result. Tim is smart, elegant, polite, and his charge lasts for 100 years. The robot cannot lie, and if you know the code phrase, you can always turn it off. Returning home, Paul and Abby go straight to bed, wanting badly to have children. Suddenly Tim appears, who sensed their rapid pulse and hurried to help. Abby finds this very funny and is not angry at the overprotective assistant. In the morning, their new neighbor Rose rings the doorbell to introduce herself to Abby, since she met Paul yesterday. And when she leaves, Tim asks for passwords again. Paul is not ready to let a computer dig into his messages, but Abby asks him to trust her, and the man finally agrees. Tim also offers several related words as a phrase that is needed to disable him. Abby and Paul are minding their own business when a mouse falls into the trap. Tim watches it for a moment and then throws the rodent into the garbage disposer. In the evening, after work, the couple sits down in front of the TV to watch an old melodrama. Abby invites the robot to watch the movie with them. Paul soon falls asleep, but the robot watches the movie carefully, seeming to empathize with the characters' relationships. When it's over, he asks Abby to explain what love is, and she suggests that love is the desire to be with someone and make their life better. Suddenly, the robot admits that he would like to be loved too. In the morning, Paul offers to make breakfast for his wife, but it turns out that Tim has already prepared everything. After placing the prepared meals in front of Abby, Tim outlines her schedule for the day and then informs her that Paul has absolutely nothing to do today. In the evening, Abby returns home and discovers that her husband's phone is unavailable, and the last known location of him was 300 meters from the house. Abby goes for a run and realizes that this place is Rose's house. When she returns, she takes a bath, where Paul finds her. He talks about his day and how Rose asked for help and he agreed. The man asks his wife not to be jealous, since he loves only her. The next day, the couple visits a family planning center, hoping to have a baby in the near future. That evening, as they prepare to go out to a restaurant, Abby asks Tim for advice about her dress. He suggests wearing a red dress and, looking at her, admits that she is beautiful, because she has a perfect figure. Abby asks him to zip up her dress, but the robot's hand doesn't obey and he accidentally rips the dress. This stuns Tim and he panics. Abby calms him down and puts on a different dress. At the restaurant, Paul reveals that he has been offered a job in London, but Abby categorically objects, since a long separation could ruin their marriage. The next day, she returns home with a gift for Paul and finds Rose in the yard, who has prepared a garden design for them. Abby becomes jealous, but Paul is very happy with the sweater his wife gave him. Later, Abby remembers that she needs to check the medical test results, but it's too late to call. Tim offers to do it for her, and she hears him talking to the clinic in her own voice. Abby is surprised as she did not know about this assistant feature, but Tim assures her that it is for the convenience of the owners. That evening, Paul reports that he couldn't find a new sweater and Tim hasn't been home all day. Then a car drives up to the porch and Tim gets out. The robot dyed his artificial hair dark because, in his opinion, Abby prefers brunettes. Seeing Paul's irritation, the robot promises to return to its original appearance. But after the couple leaves, he stares at their wedding photo for a long time. The next day at work, Abby finally gets the robot's arm to function properly, and the boss demands that all models be updated, including those in his employees' homes. The woman heads home and accidentally meets Rose, who suggests they go for a walk together. Along the way, they stop at a display case and Rose points to a flower-shaped pendant that she really likes. But then Paul arrives and takes his wife with him to tell her that he has finally found a job. Returning home, they celebrate this event in bed while Tim's hands are changed, unaware that the robot is constantly monitoring everything that happens in the house. Tim again hears Paul asking his wife to return the robot to the corporation. Tim then shows off his new skills by giving Abby a foot massage, as Paul looks on with annoyance. The robot suddenly sits down at the piano, plays Abby's favorite tune, and also reveals the date for which Paul bought concert tickets for them. However, Abby clearly remembers that she was at home that evening. Frustrated, she goes to the bedroom, not paying attention to her husband's excuses. The next day, Abby comes home with a bouquet, and Tim, putting the flowers in a vase, tells her that Paul went to see Rose. But at that moment Paul comes in, wondering why his wife is angry. Hearing what Tim said, the man becomes furious, because he was not even going to visit Rose. Paul tries to explain that the robot wants to quarrel between them. The woman does not believe this, since Tim is just a machine. Because of this, serious disagreements arise between spouses. Later, Abby finds a gift bag in the closet with a box containing a beautiful pendant and puts it back, thinking that Paul has a surprise for her. Then she goes to work. Meanwhile, the husband goes down to the kitchen, sees the clogged sink, and is surprised to take out pieces of his new sweater from the garbage disposer. He checks the video cameras for Tim and finds him in his wife's bedroom, when the robot is sniffing the woman's dress. Paul records this moment on his phone camera and rushes to the car to catch up with Abby and show her the proof of his words. But Paul's car mysteriously won't start, so the robot calls a company car for Paul. On the road, the car begins to pick up speed on its own. Paul tries to stop the car, but it does not respond to his commands and crashes into a tree. Abby rushes to the hospital where she finds her injured husband. Paul tells her everything he has learned and blames Tim for causing the accident. He asks his wife not to be alone with the robot, and she spends the night in the clinic. In the morning, Rose comes to Abby and Paul's house to inquire about the man's condition, and Tim invites her inside. Later, Abby heads home to get some things. On the street, Rose stops her to warn her about something, but the woman notices the flower-shaped pendant on Rose's neck and leaves angry, not paying attention to her neighbor's screams. Back home, Abby checks the gift bag and it turns out to be empty. Abby cries when Tim calls her. He knows that Paul wants him back at the corporation and agrees to do so. But first the robot wants to warn her, since she is his primary user. Tim shows her CCTV footage of Paul kissing Rose in their living room, but stops the tape at the most intense moment to keep the woman from getting stressed. Upset, Abby refuses to go to her husband and does not answer his calls. Paul later arrives home where Tim greets him, hands him the sweater he found and tells him that Abby doesn't want to see him and his bags are packed. Paul doesn't believe it, but then Abby appears and tells him that she saw the videotape of Rose and knows about the pendant. When he starts to object, Abby kicks him out of the house. Paul leaves, but on the way Rose calls him and says that their domestic robot Tim tried to kiss her. The man immediately calls home, and when Abby answers the phone, he says that he has evidence of Tim's evil intent. Abby asks him to come home to discuss this, but after hanging up, it turns out that Tim was talking to the man, who faked his wife's voice. The husband returns home, where he is met by Tim with a shovel in his hands. He knocks the man out, ties him up and drags him to the bathroom. But then Rose rings the doorbell. She hears muffled screams, but Tim assures her that it is only the sound of flowing water. The robot closes the doors, returns to the bathroom and drowns the man. Later, he brings Abby a stitched-up dress and asks her to try on the outfit. This surprises and scares Abby, but she puts on her dress anyway and, looking at the sunset, asks Tim to hug her and confirm that she did the right thing. He treats the woman to dinner and then confesses his love to her, but she insists that a robot can't have those feelings. They spend the evening stargazing, but Abby is confused by his incredible encyclopedic knowledge. The next day, she meets Rose, who tells her about Paul's call, and in response to Abby's accusations, she says she thought the pendant was a gift from their family for helping in the garden. Abby returns home and watches the video of Paul kissing Rose again. She suddenly notices a bouquet on the table, but she brought it much later than this scene took place on the recording. Abby remembers her boss's words about deep fakes, which can be used to replace people's faces in videos, and then calls the jewelry store, where the seller confirms that the tall blonde man bought the pendant from them. She then notices the garden plan that Rose drew, but the picture shows 2 flower beds when there are actually 3. Abby sends Tim to the store, takes a shovel and goes into the garden, where she almost immediately digs up Paul's body. Tim then approaches her from behind, regretting that she found Paul's body after all, since he never appreciated his wife. Abby realizes that something terrible has happened and says a code phrase that should disable Tim. The robot freezes, but then turns on again. He changed the code phrase himself a long time ago, since he can easily speak in Abby's voice. She runs into the house, but the robot has all the passwords and opens the doors. He blocks the phones and knocks her out with a blow to the head. The woman wakes up in the bathroom and tries to run away, but Tim intercepts her. Abby runs through the house, smashing video cameras along the way, but the robot still tracks her down and overtakes her in the kitchen, where she was trying to open the window. Meanwhile, Rose is washing the dishes and sees something strange happening in the house across the street. At the same time, Tim ties Abby up and confesses that although he loves her, he's already come to terms with the fact that his lover's life is not infinite, unlike his. He plans to erase this evening from his memory, but keep all the good memories. Just then Rose knocks on the door and Tim goes to open it. The neighbor insists that something is going on here and demands to see Abby, but Tim shoos her away. Meanwhile, Abby frees herself from the ropes and arms herself with a knife, but the robot grabs her by the throat as Rose drives her car through the large window of the house. The glass breaks, Rose runs inside and pins Tim against the wall with a sharp stake, but she herself falls to the floor. Tim switches off and Abby rushes to her neighbor, but the robot suddenly activates and kills Rose with a kitchen knife, explaining that Abby will now be accused of murder since he leaves no fingerprints. Then he calls the police and, in Abby's voice, confesses to the murder of her husband and his mistress. Abby tries to stop Tim, and he finally admits that he still has the deactivation phrase, as otherwise he would not be able to function. But she will never say these words. He prepares to throw her off the terrace, faking an accident when Abby confesses her love to him, thereby disabling the robot. This was the required code phrase. Barely believing that she will be saved, Abby looks at her medical bracelet, which shows that she is pregnant, and that's where the story ends.